Welcome to another edition of Beyond Global Waves.
And today's deep dive is a really intense one.
It really is. It's titled Another View of the News, the Gatekeeper, and the Grieving Family.
We have a truly fascinating stack of material to guide us today, too. Our mission in this deep dive is to explore a massive upcoming legal battle in the United Kingdom Supreme Court. I mean, it is a showdown that tests the absolute limits of government power.
It asks a really fundamental question, right? About how much unchecked control a single politician should have over the justice.
Exactly. But before we get into the weeds on that.
Right. Before we go a single step further, I need to make something incredibly clear to you, the listener. The sources we are diving into today contain some highly charged claims regarding the events of September 11th.
Yeah, we have to be very upfront about this.
We absolutely do. We must explicitly state that neither of us here is taking a side, nor are we endorsing any of these theories.
Right.
We are strictly impartially reporting on the contents of the provided source material and the legal mechanisms at play. Our goal is purely to convey the facts of this unprecedented legal battle.
Just looking at the constitutional questions it raises.
Yeah.
That distinction is crucial because to understand the stakes of this Supreme Court case, you first have to understand, the human element.
And the incredibly frustrating legal mechanism at its core.
Right. Imagine you're watching a championship sports match. The umpire makes a call that decides the entire game, but it looks completely wrong to you.
Like, obviously wrong.
Yeah. And you happen to have, say, 12 different high-definition camera angles, undeniable scientific proof showing the call was a mistake.
Okay, I follow.
So you point to the giant instant replay screen in the stadium, begging the umpire to just look at it. But the umpire simply says, I'm not looking at the screen. The case is closed.
Wow.
And when you turn to the league officials to, force him to look at the replay, you discover this terrifying rule. The rule book literally states that the umpire's refusal to look at the screen cannot be questioned by anyone.
That is wild, but that is essentially the legal brick wall that one family in the UK has hit. Let's start by looking at the person at center of tragedy, Geoff Campbell.
Right, yeah.
He was a 31-year-old British man, and on the morning of September 11th, he was on the 106th floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York.
And the details of how he ended up in that specific building on that specific day are genuinely heartbreaking.
They really are.
It was one of those terrible sliding doors moments. I mean, Geoff didn't even normally work at the World Trade Center.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was just attending a Risk Waters conference at the Windows on the World restaurant. He was there as a last-minute replacement for a co-director of his company.
Man, that's so heavy.
They were looking to open a New York office, and he had been tapped to head it up.
And he had only been living in New York for a couple of years. He had recently met a woman, they had just gotten engaged, and he had actually just traveled back to the UK to see his family like 3 weeks before the attack.
It's a terrible, terrible loss.
Yeah. When the towers fell, Geoff was one of the nearly 3,000 people who lost their lives. And because of the sheer scale of the devastation, it wasn't until June of 2002 that the first microscopic piece of his remains was even identified.
Which brings us to Geoff's brother, Matt Campbell. Matt is really the driving force behind this entire legal saga.
The hero of the story, in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And like any family member who loses a sibling in a sudden, catastrophic, highly public event, he was devastated. But that grief, it eventually evolved into a relentless quest for a specific kind of accountability.
And from what the sources show, that quest really shifted into high gear because of the official UK government response.
Right.
Since Geoff was a British citizen, UK law dictates there must be a coroner's inquest into his death to officially establish the cause. But that inquest didn't happen until January 2013.
12 years later.
Yeah, at the West London Coroners Court. Why on earth did it take over a decade?
Well, there's a combination of factors. The process of identifying remains at ground zero obviously took years. Then there were complex questions of international jurisdiction.
Right, that makes sense.
And just a general backlog in processing inquest for the British victims of such an unprecedented overseas attack. But when the inquest finally did happen in 2013, it was remarkably brief.
How brief?
For a victim of one of the most complex attacks in modern history, the hearing to officially determine Geoff's cause of death lasted less than 2 hours.
Less than 2 hours, that's it.
That's it. And the coroner relied on just a single one-page police summary to conclude that Geoff was unlawfully killed when a hijacked plane was deliberately flown into the building.
Okay, let's unpack this. Think about it like this. If a doctor gave your family member a terminal diagnosis, but they only did a 2-minute physical exam and based their entire conclusion on a one-page summary jotted down by a medical student, you wouldn't just accept it?
No, of course not.
You would demand a second opinion. You'd want them to run blood tests, look at the MRI, analyze all the available data.
And that is the exact sentiment driving Matt Campbell. He felt the 2013 inquest was, well, wholly inadequate for an event of this magnitude.
Yeah, I mean, understandably so.
So rather than just complaining about it, he spent years meticulously collecting his own data to force a deeper look. We are talking about a 7,500-word legal application, accompanied by over 2,500 pages of scientific evidence and witness statements.
I want to be very specific about what is in those 2,500 pages, too, because the sources make it clear this isn't just like a collection of printed out blog posts.
No, not at all.
This dossier includes peer-reviewed research analyzing dust from the destroyed building, building. The family claims this analysis shows microscopic traces of nanothermite,
which is a substance used in controlled demolition.
Right. The application also includes extensive engineering arguments analyzing the free-fall collapse building, suggesting they fell with little to no structural resistance from the floors below.
And keeping our impartiality firmly in mind here, it's crucial to understand Matt's legal position. He is not walking into a courtroom asking a judge to declare that some sprawling internet theory is the absolute truth.
Right. He's not asking for a verdict on day one.
Exactly. His argument is much more fundamental. He's saying, here is a mountain of scientific anomalies and clues that were completely ignored during that 2-hour inquest.
Just look at it.
All right. I want a real judge in a real court to examine this new evidence to establish the true, precise cause of my brother's death.
He just wants the instant replay screen turned on. He wants the second medical opinion.
Yes.
So if he has this massive binder of 2,500 pages of new science and witness testimony, why doesn't he just book a court date? I mean, how does a family actually force an inquest to reopen in the UK?
Well, you've hit on the exact friction point of this entire story. In a normal, everyday dispute, if you uncover highly relevant new evidence, you can usually file a motion and find a pathway back to a judge.
Right. That's how the justice system is supposed to work.
But the UK legal system has a very specific, very heavy lock on the door when it comes to reopening coroner inquests.
Okay.
Under Section 13 of the UK Coroners Act 1988, a grieving family cannot simply petition a court. They need something called a fiat.
A fiat, like a decree.
Essentially, yes. It is a special, legally mandated permission slip, and only one person in the entire country has the power to grant it: the Attorney General. Without the Attorney General's fiat, the courts will not even look at your application.
Wait, the Attorney General? That's a politician.
Yep.
Why would the legal system give a political appointee the sole power to decide if a judge is allowed to look at scientific evidence regarding a death? That seems entirely backward.
I completely understand why it sounds backwards to, modern ears. But if we want to understand this case, we kind of have to play devil's advocate for a moment and look at why this rule even exists.
Okay, lay it on me.
In the UK, the Attorney General has a dual role. They are a politician, usually a member of Parliament, who sits in cabinet meetings, but they are also the independent chief legal advisor to the Crown.
Interesting.
So, historically, the requirement for a fiat acts as a vital quality control mechanism.
A quality control mechanism to protect the courts.
Precisely. To protect the courts from basically collapsing under their own weight. It's known as the floodgates argument.
I see.
Without a gatekeeper, anyone who is simply unhappy with a coroner's verdict could endlessly drag grieving families, witnesses, and state resources back into court with frivolous lawsuits or baseless theories.
So the Attorney General is supposed to act as an objective filter.
Exactly, ensuring that only cases with a genuine prospect of uncovering new vital truths take up the court's time.
I mean, I can see the logic in preventing the system from being paralyzed by vexatious litigation. But Matt Campbell isn't just someone unhappy with a verdict, right? He has 2,500 pages of peer-reviewed papers.
Right.
So he submits this massive application to the Attorney General, expecting that surely this volume of material clears the bar for a fresh look. What happened?
The Attorney General flat out said no.
Just no.
Just no. The application for the fiat was denied. In a formal letter to the family's barrister, the Attorney General's office stated that the events of 9/11 were thoroughly investigated and that the conclusions are widely known and accepted.
They actually went further than that in the sources. The office called the family's application phantom, which legally translates to highly unlikely or a measure.
Yeah.
And they said it was simply not credible. Just like that, one single politician unilaterally blocks the family from ever showing their evidence to a judge.
And this is where the story pivots. It goes from being a specific debate about 9/11 to this massive constitutional earthquake regarding fairness, democracy, and executive overreach.
Right, because Matt Campbell didn't just give up.
Exactly. After fighting for 20 years, he did not just accept a no from a politician and go home. He decided to sue the Attorney General.
He filed a claim for judicial review. Now, for our listeners who might not be deep into legal terminology, what exactly is he asking the court to do here?
So, judicial review is a process where a citizen asks a judge to evaluate whether a government official acted lawfully when making a decision.
Okay.
Matt isn't asking the judge to rule on the 9/11 evidence here. He's asking the judge to grade the Attorney General's homework.
I like that way of putting it.
He is arguing that the Attorney General acted unlawfully by dismissing this massive pile of evidence without proper rational scrutiny.
But when he gets to the lower courts, specifically the divisional court, he gets hit with a ruling that honestly made my jaw drop when I read the analysis from the Doughty Street chambers.
It is a staggering legal conclusion, but one deeply rooted in British constitutional history. Judges Stuart Smith and Chamberlain ruled that the Attorney General's decision to refuse the fiat is non-justiciable.
Non-justiciable. Going back to our analogy from the beginning, that means the umpire's refusal to look at the instant replay is completely immune from review.
Yes.
The courts literally said they do not have the jurisdiction to double-check the Attorney General's homework.
That's the exact mechanism at play. And to explain why the judges tied their own hands, we have to look at the precedent they relied on. It's a famous 1977 case called Guerrier v. Union of Post Office Workers.
Let's dive into that, because 1977 feels like a long time ago to be dictating a modern family's right. What happened in the Guerrier case?
So, in 1977, the Union of Post Office Workers in the UK decided to boycott handling any mail going to South Africa.
As a protest against apartheid, right?
Exactly. But a private citizen named John Guerrier wanted to stop this boycott, arguing that delaying the mail was a criminal offense. But to get an injunction against the union on behalf of the public, Guerrier needed the Attorney General's permission.
A fiat.
Yes, a fiat.
And I'm guessing the Attorney General said no.
He did. He refused to grant the fiat, so Guerrier sued. And the case went all the way up to the House of Lords,
which was the highest court at the time.
Exactly. The House of Lords ruled that the Attorney General's public interest functions, like granting a fiat, are almost absolute. Because the Attorney General is exercising the royal prerogative, power that historically flows from the crown, the court said that judges simply cannot interfere.
Wow.
The only exception would be if there was extreme fraud, corruption, or bad faith involved.
But Matt isn't accusing the current Attorney General of taking a bribe or acting with malicious fraud. He's just saying the AG made a terrible decision by ignoring the science.
Right.
So, under the Guerrier precedent, if the Attorney General makes an honest but massive mistake, if they just completely misunderstand the 2,500 pages of evidence, is the legal system really saying tough luck?
That is the chilling reality of the divisional court's ruling. In that 1977 case, Lord Fraser explicitly addressed your exact scenario.
What did he say?
He said that if the Attorney General commits a serious error of judgment, the remedy lies in the political field, meaning Parliament, not in the courts.
The political field? How does a grieving family hold a politician accountable in Parliament?
They really can't.
They can't call a vote of no confidence. They can't force a debate in the House of Commons. That is what the courts are supposed to be for. I mean, the entire concept of checks and balances falls apart if the executive branch can just wave away evidence and the judicial branches, we aren't allowed to look.
Your frustration mirrors the exact legal friction that makes this case so significant. Because the UK does not have a single written constitution like the United States, the separation of powers is governed by these old precedents and the concept of parliamentary sovereignty.
It's just so foreign to how a lot of people think the law works.
It is. But even the judges in the divisional court, while ruling against Matt, recognized the gravity of what they were saying. They acknowledged it might seem anomalous in modern law that a government official has unreviewable power, but they felt strictly bound by the 1977 precedent.
Which brings us to the highly unusual legal maneuver that pushes this entire saga toward its final climax. Because the lower courts felt bound by an old rule, Matt's team took a massive swing.
They did. They applied for and were granted what is called a leapfrog appeal directly to the UK Supreme Court.
A leapfrog appeal, meaning they completely skipped the Court of Appeal, which is the usual next step in the ladder.
Yeah. The Supreme Court recognized that this rulebook question is so critical and the Guerrier precedent so deeply embedded that only the highest court in the land has the authority to potentially overturn it.
And we have a date for this, right?
We do. The hearing is officially set for October 14th and 15th, 2026.
This is where we need to be crystal clear for anyone following this story. When Matt walks into the UK Supreme Court in October 2026, the ultimate referee of the UK legal system is not going to look at the 9/11 evidence.
Right. They're not touching that.
They aren't going to spend 2 days talking about nanothermite or freefall physics or examining dust samples.
That is correct. The evidence regarding the tragic events in New York is merely the background context for this hearing. The Supreme Court is strictly going to answer one huge procedural question.
Which is?
Is the exercise of the Attorney General's power to allow or refuse a new inquest amenable to judicial review? In other words, in the 21st century, is it legally acceptable for a politician to hold unchecked, untouchable gatekeeping power over the justice system?
It's a fight over the fundamental rulebook of democracy. And what's incredible to me looking at sources is how grassroots this fight really is.
So absolutely.
We are talking about challenging the foundational power of the state, but the Campbell family doesn't have some bottomless corporate legal fund. We looked at their crowdfunder page. They successfully raised $7,855 just to pay the Supreme Court filing fee.
Just to get the administrative paperwork through the door, they had to rely on public donation. It's crazy.
And now they are trying to raise another £6,000 to hire publicists in the UK and the US to get international media coverage for the case.
Right.
It highlights the grueling financial and emotional disparity when regular citizens try to fight the government machinery. I mean, the state has endless taxpayer resources to defend its power. Matt has to crowdfund his filing fees just to ask questions.
And that disparity is exactly why this matters to you, no matter where you are listening from in the world.
Yeah.
Why should an international audience care about Section 13 of the UK Coroners Act or a precedent from 1977? Because it is a universal story about executive overreach.
If Matt Campbell wins the Supreme Court case, it fundamentally changes the balance of power between the citizen and the state in the United Kingdom, doesn't it?
It changes everything. It means the government can no longer just shut the door on grieving families without oversight.
Wow.
It sets a new modern precedent that guarantees regular people will always have a legal pathway to fight for the truth when they believe the state is hiding it or, simply ignoring the fact. It means the gatekeeper can finally be questioned.
It's an incredible 20-year journey. You have Matt Campbell, who started as a grieving brother searching for answers about his sibling, who went to a breakfast conference and never came home.
Yeah.
And through sheer stubborn perseverance, he has collected thousands of pages of scientific evidence, faced rejection after rejection from the political establishment, and is now standing before the highest court in the land. He isn't just fighting for Geoff anymore. He is fighting for the basic democratic right of every citizen to have their evidence seen by a judge.
It is a profound testament to the enduring power of a family's love. But, as we look toward the 2026 hearing, we should probably leave our listeners with a thought that extends even beyond Matt's case.
Okay, what do you think?
Well, we've spent this entire deep dive discussing the dangers of a human politician holding absolute, unreviewable gatekeeping power. But as governments increasingly integrate artificial intelligence into their administrative processes, we are rapidly approaching an era where the initial decision to grant or deny an investigation might be made by an automated algorithm.
Oh man, that is a terrifying thought.
Right. If the Supreme Court rules that the gatekeeper's decision cannot be reviewed by a judge, what happens when the gatekeeper is a machine?
Wow.
If an AI system scans a 2,500-page application and automatically flags it as fanciful based on its programming, and the courts have no jurisdiction to review that denial, how does a citizen ever challenge the machine?
I wouldn't be able.
Exactly. If we don't establish the right to judicial review over human gatekeepers now, we may completely lose the ability to challenge the automated state of the future.
That is an incredibly heavy thought to process, but it highlights exactly why the rulebook matters so much. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive on Beyond Global Waves. Keep asking the hard questions, keep looking closely at the evidence, and keep questioning the systems that govern the world around you. We'll see you next time.